program tonight. Tonight, we will be speaking with you about building your brand for the future and innovative marketing. My name is Heather Schlesser, the Marathon County Agriculture Agent, and I will be your moderator for tonight. Before we begin, I would like to recognize my colleagues that helped to organize this program. Jean Schriefer, the Iowa County Agriculture Extension Educator, Amanda Young, the Dodge County Agriculture Extension Educator, Lissa Seafelt, the Eau Claire County Agriculture Extension Educator, and Ashley Olson, the Vernon County Agriculture Extension Educator. Our speakers today are Wisconsin producers that will discuss the steps they have taken and the difficulties they have had establishing a market and marketing plan for their product. Our speakers are Rod Ofty, the General Manager of Wisconsin Grass-Fed Beef Cooperative, Leslie Svasinia from Ceylon Rolling Acres, and Kathy Weineman from Kathy's Creations. We are excited to have these three producers speak with us about their unique branding and marketing stories, as each has a different direct marketing niche that they're reaching. So to begin, we have a few questions prepared for our panel tonight, but if you have any questions along the way, please feel free to type them in the chat and we will make sure to answer them as we go along. To minimize distractions, we ask that you mute yourself during the presentation. To begin, we have asked each one of the panelists to prepare a brief introduction about themselves. Rod, can you kick us off?
Sure. My name is Rod Ofty. As was mentioned, I run the Wisconsin Grass-Fed Beef Cooperative as its general manager. I am also one of the larger producers of the co-op, and I have a consulting job that pays for my farming habits. So that's me in a nutshell.
Great. Thanks, Rod. Leslie, can you share a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My farm is, do you want us to share a little bit about the farm itself too?
Yes.
That piece of it? Okay.
Yes, please.
No, that sounds great. That's what I was thinking, but just as we were kind of getting planning. But my name is Leslie Sachina, and I farm in Deer Park, Wisconsin. So we're in western Wisconsin, about an hour east of the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. And I raise meat goats on pasture. And so I'm still in the process of growing our herd to our goal size, but on a high, throughout the year, we can have anywhere around between 150 to 180 animals. That includes breeding animals and kids. But we have about 40 to 50 breeding animals, boar Kiko cross goats. And we also partner with a couple area farms who farm similar management practices to help source market goats to fulfill the demand as we continue to grow our herd, since we're retaining our female stock for our herd. But we direct market everything from our herd to either wholesale accounts or direct to consumer, like individual customers. But that's we've progressed over the years, but that is where we're at. And we do a little bit of byproducts selling of skulls, horns, or organ meat, bones as well. And all of our meat is sold online, and orders are either shipped or on-farm pickup. Okay. With the exception of our wholesales is delivery, but I think we'll get into that a little bit more.
Okay. Sounds good. And Kathy, can you share a little bit about yourself and your operation? And I'm going to play the video too while you're talking.
Okay. I'm Kathy Weinman, and I have a farm between Marshfield and Stratford, and I have, at the moment, I only have like 30 sheep. At one point I had 50, and what I do is I spin the wool, I sell whole lamb and half lamb, and I'm licensed to sell pieces out of my freezer. So I kind of do it all, and then I knit and I spin and hand spin the wool from the sheep and knit it into garments and things to sell also in my shop. I have a little shop on my property. So
okay.
And I also I also sell meat chickens. I got into that, pasture raised chickens. So that kind of adds to everything.
All right, I'm just letting the video finish up here. There you go. So you guys can see a little bit about Kathy's operation there. All right. All right. So for our next question here, we're going to start with Kathy. Can you tell us if you had a marketing plan when you started selling your product? And if you did, how did you develop that plan? And what did you find it helpful to have that plan when you got started? If you didn't have it, then how did you organize your marketing when you first got started?
Okay, I probably should tell you how this all came about. I first learned to spin, then I bought the sheep, and then I learned to shear. I went to shearing school, learned to shear, and then somebody taught me how to make soap. So I do all of that. I don't do it anymore, but I did at the beginning, and I tanned my own hides at the beginning also. And I don't like to have anything go to waste, so I always take back the hides and I take back all the fat from my sheep and make it into soap. So, and I didn't really have a marketing plan. It just kind of grew. I started out selling just freezer lambs and then when I moved over here to Stratford area, then I started selling pieces. You have to be licensed to sell pieces out of your home or a shop or whatever. You have to be licensed to sell that and be inspected every year. And I started doing that because it seemed, like right thing to do. Before that, I wasn't selling the meat at farmers markets. I didn't like going to farmers markets, but I did go to craft sales and tried to sell some of that stuff. But I did not enjoy that, and I quit doing that after a while because there was no money in it. People didn't. I could barely make my table fee back most of the time, so I didn't do that anymore. So I built a little shop on my property, and it's little. At the time that I built it, the zoning said I could only have 200 square feet place, so it's not very big. But I have a freezer in there, and all my knit and crocheted stuff and my yarn and my hides are sitting in there. I have marketed the hides at consignment places, so that's the only way that I've been able to do that until I got my shop where people could come and see them. But I didn't really have a marketing plan, so it kind of grew as I went. Mostly by word of mouth, and I'd advertise at the local places was the best for me. When I first built the shop, the Country Today did a little article on me, which is great. And then people came to see what I was. And Hewitt Meats, if anybody comes and asks for sheep meat or lamb, they'll send them out to me. So that was helpful.
Okay. So, and you guys got to see Kathy's shop. It was that last image in the video there, so you can kind of get a perspective of how tiny it is that she's talking about. So
it is pretty tiny.
Yeah. So thank you, Kathy. Leslie, can you tell us what your experience was with a marketing plan?
Sure. And I'm going to, as I talk about this, I'm going to just share, I have a couple of slides that are related to my marketing. Can you guys see my screen? Yes? Okay. You get to see some pictures of my farm as I pop through there. So I probably have a little bit more, let me go back through here. Marketing, a little different marketing background than maybe a lot of farmers. I actually studied marketing in college and worked in marketing, more in a corporate side of things. So what I'm doing now, what we've always done has been, I've always had the kind of marketing training in the back of and kind of ingrained in who I am and how I approach my work. I can't really shake that, but I always knew that, like in the beginning when we were starting our herd, it really was, I knew it was important to build an online presence, even though I wasn't selling direct to start with. So our first, I think 10 goats that we had, we sold the few bucklings we had to our, to the livestock market, and then all the doelings we retained. And so we weren't really in the market yet to start selling anything direct, but I knew that in order to start building awareness of what we're doing, that I needed to start talking about and sharing what I was doing. So I started with a website about our farm and doing some very basic blogging. So, and basically there's small articles about what we're doing on the farm, and then also starting a social media presence. And that really got the ball rolling. And even as we got started and I didn't have anything to sell myself, we found that I had a lot of people starting to reach out to me about trying to source product. And as we've progressed now, I've have more formalized marketing plan. Before it was kind of like marketing pieces in place while I got the farm in order. But now my focus for our marketing plan is really heavily focused on digital marketing. But I still, right, as I say that, the in-person relationships and marketing is still really important. I kind of see them as they go together. So we may not be able to see each other all the time. I mean, obviously right now in the world of COVID, that's kind of the case, but even still, in our busy lives before that, we're not seeing our customers or prospective customers all the time, but digital marketing is a way that we can still be in front of our customers or prospective customers without physically being there. And so my main focus with our marketing plan is really to focus on our website, and then grow our email list, because that's where we do most of our selling. So on our website, I'm still blogging about farming practices, about goat meat. I really found that education and recipes and teaching my customers how to cook goat meat and how to use goat meat is really important. And I've been learning a lot myself. I found that even our customers who haven't been accustomed to growing, even if they grew up with eating goat meat, they still are, not sure how to cook it. And so a lot of it is adding value in that regard. Email marketing, we schedule a specific email that goes out typically twice a month, and it corresponds with when we have order deadlines. We have ship deadlines. We will ship orders twice a month and then have on-farm pickup once a month. Most of our orders go out through shipping, even like locally within like the cities in Western Wisconsin. And then social media, I really focus on that as relationship building. You won't see a lot of sales focused marketing on there. And because you think about it, most people go there to kind of get inspiration, get education, connect and network. And so I really try to take that mindset in how I share what we're doing on our farm. I'll still do a little bit of sales, but most of it is going to be, kind of the giving mindset and kind of 80-20, the relationship I've talked about there. And most of the time I'm going to be always pushing people, I say push, but I'm not saying that in my language, but I'm trying to guide my followers to go to my website either for sales or ultimately join my email list, because sometimes, it takes a while sometimes for customers to warm up to making their first purchase. And, they've got a lot of things on their mind. So that's really been the focus of my marketing plan. But then I also complement it with some other things as well too. But this is really kind of the core of what I'm doing marketing wise for our farm.
That's awesome.
Now I need to figure out how to unshare. Is there a place that I told you I knew what I was doing with this, and now, okay, there we go. Stop screen share. Yep. So
you got it. You're good. Thank you, Leslie. So Rod, how does your experience compare with what we've heard so far?
Well, it's very different. In the end, marketing is probably one of the most important things. If you can market rocks well, you can make $1 million. So marketing really is the end all be all. But what I've heard so far is not all marketing. I've heard marketing in terms of a brand promise, and that's what you are as a producer, and you're really positioning it that's special. I've heard marketing as a medium to communicate, and that's different than certain people talk marketing. That's different than what they're saying. And I've also heard marketing in terms of a product format, and that's also important to understand early on, because so we have lamb, we have goat. Your product format is important, but that's not marketing. Product format's more logistics in terms of, do you market whole beef? Do you market retail ready product? And that's more logistics into getting into the channel that fits for you. So we have the same challenges as a co-op, and we have our own farm brand, and we had to decide early on, and I'd encourage any young producers out there, think through early, because as you get older, your priorities change. And so we did the whole brand build, logos, tchotchkes, farmers markets, etc. And as you get older, it just seems much more practical to put them on a trailer and send them away and get the check. So, it's not a right or wrong. I think what I say about marketing is I've spoken to Moses. I talked to a lot of young producers that, kind of want guidance on what's a hot item. And there's plenty of hot items to build on. But what I'd say to anybody on this, whether it's goat, lamb, beef, trout, whatever it is, but be true to your brand. And that's marketing. So when people look at you, and whether it's Leslie or myself, and they know, wow, that Leslie, she cares about her animals, cares about the end product. She lives her brand. As long as you do that, you're going to be successful. So marketing can often be over fluffed, but really that's the core message that will make you successful regardless of your product.
That's a great take home. Thanks, Rod. So you each have unique products that you sell and market, and how you market those products. Leslie, can you tell us a little bit about what it's like to direct market your meat to restaurants, and how did you get started targeting restaurants as a direct market for your product?
Sure. So I'll back up a little. I talked a little bit about how we sell, like what we sell. And so I would say probably pre-COVID, about 80% of our market was wholesale market. And so we were selling to some restaurants, so select restaurants, retail, and a few places that do online retail sales more in the grass-fed market. And we have been continually trying to incrementally grow our direct to consumer market. And because we're specialty, that's why we ship our meat versus go to markets. It just makes it a little bit more accessible, and I'm one person. But as I started, wholesale has really, our direct to customer has really grown this last year. And that's, I've been focusing on that, but our wholesale, probably call wholesale restaurant market has been, it continues to grow, and it continues to be a good option to move a large amount of product. But, there's less opportunity for margin compared to our individual customers. But you kind of have to take a look at the numbers and see what makes the most sense, when you're looking at that, because in individual customers, that takes a little more time, to sell a handful of cuts of meat versus a whole animal. And so I'm just going to pull up, I have one slide that I wanted to share, and it kind of gets a little bit at what Rod was talking about too. Let's see here now. I've got to get back to share screen. All right. So, all right, I've got my e-commerce site. So one thing I wanted to mention too, even before we get into some of the feedback in terms of wholesale market, the big thing is also looking at logistically, how do the logistics work? Because it doesn't really make sense to be selling. It sounds really cool to have your product and your meat in a restaurant or a retail site where you can tell people to go buy it. But if you can't make it work logistically or make it work out number wise, it shouldn't be worth your time, because you need to be making some margin and some income on your product or on your meat or your whatever you're selling. And so for goats, as we've gotten into selling direct, almost all of our wholesale customers, with the exception of one or two, we typically coordinate the processing. Some of our customers will buy live goats from us, our wholesale customers, and they will coordinate where it gets processed, and we will do the drop. And then, so that's a little bit different, but you still have to, again, know your production costs. But when you know your costs, that means you know your cost to raise and also to sell. And so selling, it's really easy for us as farmers to think about, what do we have into the animal for feed and our time. But selling also includes, your marketing expenses, how much it costs to run my truck, our freezers, things like that. And so one other item, and that is to also, and you look at wholesale expenses, goats, I've learned are really expensive to process per pound of usable meat. And so as we've continued to emphasize on our direct marketing, and this is for both wholesale and direct, we actually raise our goats to a larger weight range, but still under a year. So a lot of livestock markets, it's somewhere between 50 to 70 pounds live weight in our area or region. And we're raising our goats to be more about between 80 to 90 pounds live weight, still selling with under a year of age. We haven't really seen a lot of differences in terms of meat quality. The difference is we're able to lower our cost to process per animal. And also a lot of our customers, goat is still like probably even the cuts are much smaller than lamb. And so a lot of people are used to comparing goat, they kind of think about goat and they compare it to like like a nice big fat lamb chop or pork chop or even cuts of beef, and they're like, oh, it's so tiny. I remember the first time we got one of our goats processed for ourselves, and the butcher shop was like, it's so tiny, and it's like, well, they're little animals, so you kind of keep that in consideration. So there's a lot of products we don't sell wholesale, but what we've discovered is that we've learned is that primals can be a lot more economical. And so if you're not familiar with primals, that means it's the hanging carcass. And the nice thing about goat is that they're small enough that a lot of our customers who buy from us, they will break down the animal themselves into the cuts and how they want to use it. And so for us, the processing for that usually can be, if it's a whole or it might be halved or quartered, is anywhere between like 40 to 50% less than what you might get for like a cut and packaged animal. And so that's really helped us. The only challenge about that is that primals, well, they're more economical. There's the cold chain challenges. So like before, when we had licensed to be wholesale, to have a wholesale license to be able to transport meat that we sell to our like the restaurant we work with nearby here in Amory, we have to have an inspected cooler or a transport, and a cooler works fine. But with a whole goat, you've got legs sticking out of the cooler, and so that really, it may not seem like that big of a deal, but you need to make sure that you're maintaining the integrity of the frozen product, for food quality and food safety. And so that just wasn't gonna work for us. And storage, when we were doing that, the first time we did it once and realized that logistically it wouldn't work. So we started getting the whole animals quartered. That helped a little bit better, but we've invested in a refrigerated trailer, which helps a lot for transporting our meat. And then also once we added a walk-in freezer, that gave me a little more flexibility to store our primals because they take up a big amount of space even in like a deep freezer, just to give me a little bit more logistics of I didn't need to do all my deliveries in one day. In terms of, I'm just going to close this. This was the only item that I wanted to show in terms of sharing. All right. Is my sharing screen off, Heather?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. All right. And then, so in terms of other, like for me, for wholesale, I've been really strategic on how we, on our partnerships. I'm not looking to try to get our product in everywhere. Part of it is because we're specialty. I know goat isn't for everybody. And so it's depending on what type of market you're serving, you want to make sure you find a good match. And so, it's pretty, a lot of people will think of goat as being very focused in cultural market, which is true, but also we've had a lot of growth and interest in the local food side of things. And that's really where more of our growth is. And also our wholesale customers who have similar shared like views on farming practices and are willing to pay more of a premium for our meat. So when I look at potential partnerships, I think about, is it a reasonable footprint delivery for me, or is there going to be future opportunities for me to maybe deliver to some other customers in an area down the road? Is it the restaurant we work with is great partner for us because it gives us local visibility. We do a lot of shared promotions whenever we do deliveries or they have our meat on the menu. I'm always sharing what they're doing, sharing that we're doing that. So like it helps people who may not want to buy from us to start with, maybe buy a bulk box or buy some meat, but that it's a way for them to experience our meat without having to go elsewhere. And something else to keep in mind too, while a lot of places want to support locally, not everybody maybe has the right the business structure or their way their margins are built, that they still want to have the cheapest product available. And so you don't want to undersell your product. So make sure, again, going back to pricing, and also know that, it's really hard to raise your prices after the fact. And you don't want, and for goat, especially, most of us are competing with cheap imported meat from Australia. So I've taken the approach that it's not, if that's what somebody wants, that's fine, but I can't compete with that. So that's not what I sell on. I still, I'm mindful of our pricing, but we can't be trying to compete with that meat. Some other things that I look at, like, again, I talked about those who value local food, local business relationships. So I've there's 2 communities that we are kind of connected with, Amory and New Richmond, in our area. And so those are the communities I really focus on building local relationships, even though we still have a pretty decent footprint in the Twin Cities. But you never know, like, who might be interested in your product. And locally, I feel like there's more local businesses are willing to make connections and help you. And that's been really beneficial, especially on the wholesale side for us. We've been focused on farm to table style restaurants, restaurants that focus on good, local fresh ingredients, food co-ops. And then also, like, when we are starting to work with a new customer, sometimes I've given them samples. We've also done some special options for them to have a special feature on the menu, not necessarily a regular menu, to kind of, get, their clientele warmed up or familiar with this new product. And then a couple of things, and I can maybe share this later, or I can do this now, Heather, but I asked one of the restaurant we work with quite a bit to share the buying manager, the purchasing manager, for some feedback for farmers who are interested in working with restaurants. And so I can share that now, or I can share that later.
You can do it now. I think
okay.
they're interested.
Okay. So we have a really good partnership with the Farm Table in Amory, Wisconsin, which is about 15 minutes north of us. They work with a lot of local farms, and their purchasing manager has been really great to work with. And so I'd asked her if she'd share some feedback. And so I've got a big long list, but I'll just kind of give the highlights. But she talked about communication is key. Be as clear as possible about your products, your prices, and timelines, and get in touch early with the buying manager. Sometimes they have a purchasing manager, or it may be the chef. That way they can consider their options. And businesses still appreciate ongoing communication. And especially if there might be changes, in your production with farming or processing, and also giving your wholesale customers an order guide of what's available at what time or for what price. She talked about, especially for produce, even a once a week email up on product availability. That's obviously maybe a little bit different if you're dealing with meat sometimes. Legible invoices, this should probably be a basic thing. So this is probably something you could check off on your list pretty easily. Computer generated, she says, are best in submitting them on time. We always, on this one, I usually will print off a copy of the invoice and tape it physically on the product. But I will also, like, with a new customer, when I deliver it, but then with new customers, I also ask, like, what do they want? Wholesale customers, who should the invoice go to? Because one of my newer customers wants me to send it by email directly to the accountant manager. And it works really well that way too. She also mentioned too, she's like, the reality is also businesses have to make margins too. So understand that sometimes, people are willing to pay a little bit more for local nutritious food, but sometimes may not want to pay really high rates. So, kind of keeping in mind that there's, that cost of doing business wholesale, there's margins related to that. She also talked about relationship building, and cross promotional opportunities are really enjoyed, especially on social media. It doesn't take much time or money to take pictures of new produce coming in, or a farmer snapping a picture of the product in the retail. So but the customer base can be, reach can be really enormous when you're doing that cross marketing for a really good win-win. And so they've been a really great partner in a good way. I'd probably say that they've also been really good for us to learn how to continue to create partnerships with wholesale accounts. I would say too, one thing that we're working on is building an online ordering system for our wholesale accounts. With our e-commerce site, we can have the ability to create like a mini store or a hidden store. And some of the feedback I was getting from it wasn't towards me, but I was listening to one of my friends who's in the produce side of things. They direct market and buy some products in from other places. And he was raving about how this one farm had an online ordering system that was super easy to use. And so I think any way that you can make things easier for your customer is going to make things easier. And then that applies to your wholesale accounts. So right now those are the only orders that come through to me individually, but eventually we're going to transition it that way. I still will have new wholesale customers come in and contact me first to kind of get the ball rolling. But then from there, because sometimes they have different needs, but that's kind of where we're at. But it looks like there is some, I saw there might be some questions related to wholesale. Do you want me to cover that now or later?
So I was going to say, you've touched on, I haven't seen the couple questions that have come in after this one, but on the first question, you've touched on it a little bit. The person was wanting to know how you invoice for your meat customers. And then like, how do you break out the butchering fee? Is that included in the price that you are marketing them for? And then how do you explain the value or basically the pricing of your meat? How do you justify that, so to speak, and get your customers on board with that?
Okay, hopefully I remember everything that you asked. So for pricing, we've really gotten away from splitting up the processing and the processing fee. I'm more than happy to share what the processing costs are with my customers, both individual customers and wholesale account, but I find that it's just sometimes gets kind of confusing to customers when they're thinking of it, when we're explaining it in two different, like you pay, here's the cost that comes to me and then the cost that's for processing. And so even when we when we sell a primal whole goat, I will build in the processing cost right into the hanging weight. So our primals are sold by hanging weight, but hanging weight, but the price is set. So it includes the processing is built into there. And then everything else that we sell for cuts, and even when we do like whole goat boxes, which is like me pulling the parts of a goat from our freezer to build a whole goat, they may not come. I mean, chances are they probably came from the same goat because we kind of keep things inventoried by when they come in. But even that, we are building in the processing into the cost. The whole goat is per pound. It's paid. The price is set per pound with processing built in. I've just found like when we got started, when we were working with a butcher to sell, I mean, I know that's the way that's like the best way to get started selling direct, but it's really confusing to the customer, especially if they haven't been around that type of transaction to understand like how that all works. So we just have made it, we built it in to make it easier.
Okay.
And then invoicing, so our wholesale customers, we will invoice them and they pay us after delivery. And then unless we haven't had any issues yet, but if we have an issue with payment, then we'll probably start doing payment upon delivery. But all of our other orders are paid, our customers pay online and it has to be paid before it'll be either on farm pickup or delivery.
Okay.
So it's kind of it's nothing like Amazon, but it's kind of that, a couple step process, transaction process online.
Gotcha. And then there is one more specific question for wholesale. The person wants to know, does it make sense to introduce potential wholesale customers with some USDA cuts first?
Yeah, we've done some of that. It kind of depends on the customer. So before we were able to do some of the primals, we had done some larger cuts, or we have sold like ground or stew meat. It's harder it depends on what they're doing, but I try to stay away from some of the cuts just because it's easy to go through, especially with goat. It's a little different than beef, I think, probably because we have a smaller quantity of meat per animal, but you can move pretty quickly through, let's say, chops. So, but yeah, that would be a good way to get started. Sometimes when I give samples, I'll just give some meat to the chef to experiment with or try out, and that would be fine. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Leslie.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Rod, we're going to jump over to you here. So can you tell us what it's like being part of a cooperative? What are the positives? What are the negatives? And then how do the producers of the cooperative get paid for their product?
Sure. Well, the great thing about a co-op is you're a large democratically run organization. The bad things about a co-op are that you're a large democratically run organization. I'm not trying to be funny, but it's great to be member owned. I mean, that makes you proud, and it's just it's a good thing at the core. But it can be very slow making decisions, and sometimes when they're critical to make, you've got the back and forth and the bantering and the blah 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 that I call that's not really helpful as a business. But nevertheless, in the marketplace, a co-op is a strong marketing vehicle, because if you're marketing to a food co-op, you can talk about Principle 6, which is co-op support of the co-ops. And in Wisconsin, it's a great story. So those are the things in a nutshell. The other biggest weakness is, we've all heard that the chain is only strong as its weakest link. And when you've got a cooperative of 250 producers, you might have some world-class producers, but you're going to probably have a few that don't know what end of the cow is the tail. So yeah, and that comes back to the group think and education and working together to make us all better. So.
Awesome. So Rod, a question did come in, and the person wants to know, what are the requirements for grass-fed beef to you?
Great question. So, because you're going to see a lot of different things in the marketplace, and all this falls under marketing, but for us, the 100% USDA grass-fed label is an FSIS a federally approved label, and you have to have that. Your protocol has to be approved, and the label has to be approved by the FSIS in order to put that on a label at a federal plant. That's pretty important, because these days, if you are raising beef and you're trying to compete, you'll hear all natural, you'll hear free range, you'll hear vegetarian diet, and it gets to the point where it's very confusing. So to be able to do that, and 100% grass-fed means, the USDA definition when they had a program was 99% of the forage of the animal's lifetime will be grass forage based. I think USDA is smart saying 99, because if we're all really 100% focused on perfection, even the seed heads of grass are a type of grain. So we don't want to get too carried away, but it's about the volume. And back to the marketing, I always say it's about intent. Because if a producer says, okay, Rod, I got cattle to ship to the co-op, we're members, we signed the affidavit, and they only had a little bit of corn, that's okay, right? And unfortunately, that's not okay, because our brand promise, back to that statement I had before, is that these animals will be outside, they'll never be confined, they have access to fresh water and fresh air 24/7, and they will be grazed and or fed harvested grass the lifetime of the animal. So that's the definition, both the USDA definition, our definition as a co-op. We have a few more stricter animal welfare things that we chose to do as part of our brand promise, but that is the definition of grass-fed.
Thank you. So another question came in. To be a member of the cooperative, you have to be a producer in Wisconsin, or can you be from another state?
You do have to be. So the rest of our brand promise in our protocol is that the animals have to be on a Wisconsin family farm for at least 12 months. When we founded the co-op, we were uber local. So we were born, raised, and processed in Wisconsin. It was on our label, was super. But what we found out really quickly as we grew, we ran out of cattle, because we just weren't finding cattle that met the criteria, short on membership, short on finishing quality. And that's where I think co-op, it takes more time than it should have, but everyone doesn't think the same rate, and there was good debate. But what we said is, if you go to a bigger co-op in Chicago, for them, local is regional, and it's not good or bad. That's better than Australia, right? So what we said is, I live on the Mississippi River. I have friends that are in the heart of the Driftless, but they happen to have a Minnesota license plate. So what we said is, if you are a connecting state to Wisconsin, we can buy feeder cattle from those states. So I think that was a smart decision, because we didn't turn our backs on our brand promise, but we still say they must be finished and or raised 12 months on a Wisconsin sustainable family farm. So that was a good thing that allowed a lot of us that live on the outer periphery, and I buy probably 2/3 of my feeder cattle from producers in southeastern Minnesota and or northeastern Iowa. So that was a smart adaptation, probably, Gene, if you remember, whether that year 4 or 5, I think, in the co-op history.
Okay. Thank you. Rod, would you be able to touch a little bit on the pricing question that came in earlier, how you guys set your prices and how do you communicate that price to your customers?
Sure. So again, we had a lot of these debates early on in the organizational structure. What we decided on is we chose the USDA car lot report, which is a federal USDA report issued every day and actually every week. A lot of our members kind of got flustered about that because, we should never look at conventional. We should ignore conventional. We don't want to be conventional. And they're right. But the fact of the matter is, if you're a beef producer and your animal falls out of the protocol for the co-op at any time, what's your market of last resort? It is always the conventional market. So it's a good benchmark. Secondly, what I really like is it's a public, freely accessible point of data. So nobody can say, oh, Rod talks about all this stuff, but he's really got a magic hat and a magic formula and a slide rule, and he's coming up with all this hocus pocus. No, anyone can find out what the conventional pricing is anytime. And then our brand promise our promise to our producers, not brand promise, but promise to the producers that's in our bylaws is that we commit to a 20% plus premium to that number. So let's say it's 180 right now. If you look up the USDA car lot report for select beef, take that number times 1.2, and it'll be something in the 210, 220 range. And we will always be above that. And we have for the history of the co-op. Sometimes we're in the 30+% premium, but that's how we do it. And then our board reviews those prices every month and just make sure we're at our benchmark, we're a little higher. We look at our P&L, how we doing making money. If we can give a bit more, we do, but we're always at or above that 20% premium, which is a pretty nice place to be.
Wonderful. Thank you, Rod. All right, Kathy, I'm going to jump over to you now. So you mentioned it a little bit earlier when you were doing your introduction that you sell pelts and you sell soap. I guess, could you speak with us a little bit about what got you into marketing these products, these value-added products that a lot of people probably wouldn't have even thought about, keeping the fat and turning it into soap, or keeping the pelts and tanning them? What was your thought process behind that?
Well, probably just the pelts. I just couldn't see throwing away a pelt. And I tanned them myself at first for the first 4 or 5 pelts, but then, that's kind of a lot of work. And I used to be able to get a kit here in Wisconsin that can't get anymore because it's stored closed. So then I started just sending to a tannery, there's also a tannery in Wisconsin, which is very handy. And I'll save the hides for the entire year of all the sheep that I've butchered, and I salt them and hang them in my shed. And then once a year, I take them all down to the tannery, which is now in Milwaukee. It used to be in Sheboygan Falls. So I don't know. I just I just couldn't see throwing that away. That's a valuable product to me. And the soap I found, a friend taught me how to make soap, and I started making soap with my sheep fat, and I found that it's very non-drying to your skin. So, my husband used to put baby lotion on his legs every time he took a shower because they itched. And since he's been using my soap, he doesn't have to do that anymore. So he's been pushing the soap. And I have a lot of regular customers, like all over the country. I do mail my soap out to different places. The people that used to live here that moved away, and now they want my soap. And as for how I got into how I market myself, when I first put my shop up, I put a book out there for people to sign up with their name and address. And way back then, I used to mail them a newsletter once a year so they could, see what I had. And since then, I've gotten their ink, the postage went up just a tad. Now I do it by email. I send them out an email notice so then they can order the lamb, the coals and the halves if they want to do that. And I have a fairly large number of people that buy coals and halves, which is great. And the way I price that is by looking at the sheep market. And way back when I set my last price, the sheep market was fairly good. And so I kind of went off of that. I don't vary the price much. I picked the price and I stuck with it because I think that's easier for people to figure it. And the way I do it is I sell them live weight. I have a scale in my barn. I weigh the lamb. I take it to the butcher and then send them a bill for the weight of the lamb. And they pay the butcher for whatever his charge is. It makes it a lot easier for me and easier for them, and they know what they're paying for. And the yarn, of course, I've always spun, so it seems like I've always spun, but I guess I haven't. And I knit. I always knew how to knit and crochet, so I make various things. And I have gotten a fair number of people that want their cat hair or their dog hair spun up. And I have done that for several people, which is fun.
I'm going to send you some of my dog's hair.
Okay. What kind of dog do you have?
He's a shepherd mix and he sheds like crazy. So.
Okay. Well, I need the combings. I once got trimmings from a dog, and that's just impossible to spin. I managed to do it and made them whatever they wanted, but I said never again. Anybody wants to send me combings from the animal on it, but I can do that. Yep, not a problem.
All right. Well, hey, Kathy, on a more serious note, we do have a question for you that just came in. How do you set your retail store hours?
Well, I just, when I first set the hours, my husband was doing Taekwondo, so Tuesdays and Thursdays he was gone until 7, so I made it from noon to 7. Since then, he's quit doing that, and what I've done now is just I have some Tuesdays and Thursdays. I have afternoon. I'm out there, and Saturday pretty much all day. But I can be out there anytime. This shop is on my land. All they have to do is call me, and I can be out there and meet them, any day, anytime. It's not a problem.
Awesome. Well, thank you. All right. So the next question that I have for our panelists is, all of you have an online presence. So my question to you is, how did you get started? What was the process like? How hard was it? Was it intimidating? And then I think the more important question, because we all know you're all set up, how do you maintain it, or who maintains it? Do you hire somebody? Do you not hire somebody? Do you do it yourself? And then I'll stop there because I know that's kind of a lot. So Rod, I'm going to have you start us off with this question. So again, how did you guys get started with your web presence, and then who maintains it right now?
So we started with a web presence with a consultant just to get a basic web page set up and track information and interest. I think that's important unless you're really handy. Professionals they're a bit more expensive, but they're always the best value for money. Now, as we've grown and invested more, we actually have an e-commerce platform, which is critical to doing online business, and we hire that out as well. So that's our stance.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a follow-up question there. You mentioned that you kind of get some statistics or data off that website. Can you tell how many sales are generated because of that online presence, or what kind of statistics is that giving you?
Yeah, so our analytics right now that we get are, well, first of all, when people order a box online, or they order a custom half or whole steer, they are forced to fill in a how did you hear about us, which is very helpful. So that we know their online is powerful. Younger people these days do everything with their phones. So forget the yellow pages, forget even sometimes a website. So online presence and search words are really critical. Yeah. Was there a follow-up to that, Heather?
No, that was what I was wondering. And Kathy, how about you? How did you guys get started with your web presence, and who does the maintaining?
It kind of started at a thing I went with that you were doing to set up my website. And what I did was the first one I set up myself. I went with GoDaddy, and they had a platform there, and I did it all, and it was okay. But then at some point they stopped supporting that particular format that I picked. So I had to go with another one. So I had them do it then, which they did a much better job, of course, because I don't know what I'm doing. And then recently I've had somebody kind of tweak it a little bit. There's always people coming on your email offering you to do something with your website because it's not doing what they think it ought to do. So I kind of try to ignore them because they just want money. You had suggested I connected to Facebook and Twitter, which I did. First of all, I guess I set up a business page on Facebook, and I connected that to Twitter. So I have a business page on Facebook, and then I had this website thing that I did. So I have the two, and I have a blog on my Facebook. I have a blog actually that she finally made on my website too that I don't go very often because it's kind of a pain to go out there,
Okay.
But the Facebook I try to update now and then whenever something new has happened.
Okay. All right. Leslie, how about you? I know you talked earlier about your web presence. Who's maintaining that? How'd you get it set up? Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So most of what I'm doing for web presence is all managed through me. And I would say since web tools are a lot easier to use compared to when I was learning how to do some of this when I was in college. Or even my first job out of school. And so, our foundation for our online presence, as I talked about before, is really our website and email marketing. And so to start with our main farm website, we've got two sites. Eventually, I'm going to be probably in the next year kind of merging them together. But we have our silenrolling.acres.com is our main farm site. And we have that, it's through Weebly, is our provider. And I know a lot of farms also use Square as well, but they have a really nice backend tool where you can it's pretty easy to set up if you're somewhat comfortable with technology tools. It's kind of, they call it drag and drop. And so once I built how the site was, the content for the site, how it's going to be laid out. And then from there, most of my updates are really to my blog content. And that's also how Google knows that continues to learn how your website is relevant and what you have to offer is by continuing to add new content. And so I do that through our blog, and the blog portion of our site is really on the back end. There is a fairly easy tool where I can just dump in our content and upload pictures. So I'm not really doing a lot of other structural updates to our site. And I usually will update the blog 2 to 3 times a month, maybe even a couple times more. But I'm really, my focus, and then we're pretty involved on Instagram and Facebook. And so posting pretty regularly and engagement that way, just to continue to have that touch point and relationship building with our customers. But I'm also always thinking about, if I share something, how can I make good use of this? So if I'm sharing a series of pictures and telling a story about how we were frost seeding in our pasture, can I reuse that somewhere else? So then I will either reuse that in a blog entry, or vice versa. I'll take a piece of the blog and use it as a Facebook post or an Instagram. There's a lot of different ways that you can use your content in different ways, whether it's within the story side of things, Reels, which is similar to TikTok, and then also your regular posts, even some of our photos. I will also think about how can I convert this into a video. And so I'm really trying to be like, how can I repurpose my content without having to create, using the photos, the imagery, and the words I've already put into place. And then when I'm putting together our email newsletter, I'm looking back at what have I shared this last month, or what do I need to share? And so I have actually I'm looking over, I have like a calendar where I have it outlined on the type of my content topics. And some of that is tied into social media and some of it's tied into our website, but also ultimately is that all that content will feed into my email newsletter for my customers. If I need to elaborate on a certain topic of either or a recipe, it kind of all ties back into what I share with my customers through the email newsletter. And I'm not really concerned if my customers saw it on Facebook or somewhere else, because not everybody sees things or remembers what you saw, or even if you shared it. Like, I will also republish articles I've written in the past and update them, because as much as I'd like to think everybody is reading my content in a fine-tooth comb and remembers things, they don't. I mean, they might remember concepts, but I'd say, don't be afraid to reuse or repurpose your content, because it takes a while for people to actually, to remember. Repetition helps. Obviously, you don't want to be saying the same things all the time, but that's really helped me in terms of continuing to create new content and add more value to our customers and our followers. And I also say too, like Rod touched on this a little bit too, but for those of you who are on here, who most of you probably are farmers too, it's really easy to not want to show your picture or your face on any of your marketing, because I think most of us are in farming because we like what we do, but we don't always want to be out there, with our smiling faces on things. And I would really encourage you to include that in your marketing, on your website and social media presence, email communication. Have pictures of you, your family, with your product, with your animals. You are part of your brand, whether you like it or not. That's really also what differentiates you, in addition to some of your other product attributes. And people, like, when I look at statistics on what posts are most popular, or things that people respond to more in our email list, I mean, aside from sales stuff, it's really when there's a personal story or there's pictures of me and my family. And so I've had to get a lot more comfortable with being the face of my farm, but it makes a big difference. So I think, if you take anything away from this, I would encourage you to get more comfortable having you be the face of your farm. And it's, try to be, you want to have a polished, I've kind of take the approach of having a polished feel. I mean, you want to have a polished, kind of put together feel, but you also don't want to be too like corporate-y. I mean, that's why I think that personal brand really works well for direct marketing with farms. And, you were asking Rod too about, like looking at sales numbers and things like that. When we're doing our week core, we have inventory on hand because can be seasonal. I found that our emails really correspond with our sales orders. So I'm trying to be really strategic on doing the ask and promoting our product with our email marketing as it relates to order deadlines, and we can see combination that way as well. So that's kind of a big dump on what on kind of where I'm at with our online presence, but it's kind of a big beast. But I think if you can I found that if I can repurpose content, it really helps in doing that and keeping it moving.
No, I think that's a great tip. Rod had a comment he wanted to add on to something you had said, Leslie. So I'm going to turn the floor over to Rod.
Thanks. Yeah. So back to, kind of our core messaging and marketing. I know it's so hard to think about do's and don'ts when you're started, but Leslie made a really great point about, especially with food service. Food service means the sector serving restaurants. Okay. That's food service sector. And it may be a good channel for you to go into, but here's a key thing. So 9 out of 10 people will always say yes to local. Yes, we want pricing. Yeah, we love your story. We love your product. But if they are not willing to put your name, your story, and to upsell your product, just walk away. It's so important that if they don't, then you're just going to be competing with conventional products, and you're really not going to be differentiated, and they're not going to make money on your product, and they won't reorder. If they are willing to tell your story, give you a special spot on the menu, have the waiters or waitresses talk about it, have the menu itself talk about why you're special, and that they're willing to upcharge and sell for that, those are the partners you want. So just thought that's super duper important in terms of your positioning.
That is a great tidbit. And actually, we're coming up on 8:30. Well, actually, it now is 8:30. So I was going to have you guys all end with a piece of advice that you would give those that are starting out. And Rod, I think that's a great piece of advice for those that are starting out. But I don't want to steal your thunder. So if there's something else you'd like to share, another piece of advice you'd like to give, I'm going to give you that opportunity.
Thanks. Yeah, I guess the link to that would be, I know this is a marketing piece, but marketing link to that is don't undervalue your story. People, as a local producer, you Uber trump every other marketing vehicle out there. So if there's a local grass-fed person, you're really in that community, you will always want to buy it from them versus the Wisconsin Grass-Fed Beef Co-op, where, yeah, great, we're local, but we're all Wisconsin, but you want to buy from that local person. So understand your importance, and then understand your costs. I know costs may not be in the marketing theme, but don't ever be scared. Lastly, for anybody that comes and is a tire kicker or says, hey, you're local, you should be cheaper. I can buy hamburger for $2 at Quick Trip, then go to Quick Trip. But understand your costs and don't be scared to charge what you're worth.
Thank you. Kathy, how about you? Do you have a piece of advice for those that are starting out?
Well, I'm not sure. I've advertised locally mostly because that's where the people that come to my place. Any small local newspaper and things like that is, in word of mouth is where I've had my booth. And I have cards that I put out at, like in the meat markets and that Maranatha Market, which is not Maranatha Market anymore, but they've moved, and places like that where I have my cards for people, if they're interested in lamb, they know how to find me.
Awesome. Thank you. Leslie, how about you? A piece of parting advice for those that are starting out?
Yeah, and I just a note, I forgot to mention our e-commerce site is through GraceCart. So if folks are wondering about that, but I would say, if you're just getting started out, start small. If you aren't, when we started selling, first halves, and I realized a half a goat is not much. So we focused on wholes, partnering with your butcher, and then, get into selling cuts if that's something you want to do, a little bit at a time. But I think in terms of marketing, I think no time, like there's, the sooner you can start sharing what you're doing on your farm from a marketing standpoint, education, especially in the online space, because online is it's kind of expected that you have an online presence these days. That's just going to help get the ball rolling for as you continue to grow. And I think social media is great for relationship building, but I think it's really important to have a real website and start develop an email list. So we have a more advanced email list provider right now, but a really great one to start with that we started with that's free for up a certain level is Mailchimp. And so I would really recommend start collecting email addresses. You can do that in person, or look for other ways to incentives to do that. And even if you're not communicating as regularly as we are, I think that is a really good starting point. So when you start to market more or have more product to sell, you already have a following and people who have been kind of seeing you and your journey as you progressed with your farm. And that's really important because it's a lot harder to sell when all of a sudden you just show up and you've got product, but you haven't started to build that awareness of who you are and what you're doing. So I'd really recommend doing the website and email list, just have the basic setting and have some type of social media presence. It doesn't need to be really elaborate, but it's kind of the standard for today for being in that digital space, and also having people understand what you do as a farmer. I think the digital space is such a great place because through can be so visually appealing in what we're doing on the farm, or teaching people how to cook meat and things like that, that it's is really advantageous for the type of work we're in. So I would really recommend those things getting started.
Wonderful. There is a request for you to share your slides with some of your farm pics on there. So if you wouldn't
Yes.
mind doing that. And
Sure.
then there is another question that came in, and I think this would be for everybody. So whoever would like to answer it while Leslie's pulling up her slides. How do you guys reconcile photos of cute animals with the meat business in regards to their, your website or your Instagram posts? So I guess, do you ever get any flack or anything like that from people that see these cute little animals and later on, they're on your dinner table?
Yeah. Well, no, that's a good question. I'm just going to go through and share some of these pictures here. So I try I try to kind of I don't talk about it all the time, but then this page is probably more of our farm photography. You can see a lot of our farm pictures if you go to, especially like Instagram and Facebook as our social media accounts. So there you go. There's my pictures. I'm going to end. So for me, like for that kind of reconciling it, I always try to take the approach and kind of like, I know not everybody grows up or doesn't have the experience of raising meat animals. So I can understand, especially like when you're looking at like cute, like baby animals and things like that. But I try to communicate like with, compassion, but also the reality is that we're, a lot of our population consumes meat as part of their diet, and this is part of the reality of raising livestock. This is part of their purpose, it can be sometimes even the idea of like it can be tough to sometimes part with them and say goodbye when it's time for their harvest date, but it's I try to get, even personally, I try to get more attached to like our breeding animals than I do, our market animals, if I'm being, really honest. But I try to share sometimes, like sprinkle in a little bit of those stories or reflections on what it means to raise meat animals and that process of why we're doing it and the purpose. But I also, sometimes I try not to address that with every single post, like if I say, or communication piece. So it's tough, but I also like, especially with goats, sometimes we run into some of this challenge a little bit more of some people are like on Instagram, I stay away from a lot of the cute goat hashtags because that'll bring in people who, I understand some people don't look at goats as being a meat animal, even though they are. So I'm sometimes more attuned to not drawing in people who really get uncomfortable with it. But it's it's kind of a delicate line, but it's part of the reality of what we're doing.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. All right, Rod, you going to share your slides with us? And then, so while Rod's pulling up his screen, there is another question that came in. And I know we're over time, so if you guys have to go, I apologize. But thank you again for being with us tonight. And keep in mind, our next program is on March 23rd, where we're going to be talking about profitable meat marketing and an introduction to Cornell meat price and yield calculator. So if you have more marketing questions or how to price stuff out, make sure you tune in on the 23rd. So the question that came in is, do you recommend any types of tangible marketing? Do you have farm brochures? Do you give out business cards or other takeaways with the purchases? So I don't know, Rod, since you've got your screen up, do you want to answer that one or?
I will. I would like to just close the argument around the cute picture deal. Can you see my screen, Heather?
We can. You're not in the presentation mode. You're in the notes.
Oh, okay.
Or in the.
How's that?
There you go. Now you got it.
So this kind of summarizes it. So what, people say, oh, you're a farmer, you love your animals, da, da, da. Nobody understands the value of life more than the farmer. But it is it's the business, it's the nature of the circle of life. So my point is, we raise animals that have a great life and they have one bad day at the end. And it's for all of us, even as humans, it's not about how long we live, it's about the quality of life we have while we're here. So then you just make the choice and you say that to people and they can go to the right, which is some of our working ladies on our ranch, or on the left where there's not a blade of grass as far as you can see. And that's back to, so you throw it back on them. They make the choice of what they purchase. And again, even to the humans, it's not about, none of us are going to live forever. And if we're brutally honest, cattle would not even be on the landscape if it wasn't for farmers. There would be zero. So, make the choice. But can you repeat the last question, Heather?
Yes, let me find it. It's hidden now. Okay. Do you recommend any types of tangible marketing? Do you have farm brochures? Do you give out business cards or other takeaway items with purchases?
Yes, all the above. The more information you get in the hands of people, the better. And also the more practical, but doesn't need to be super glossy. A lot of the stuff's going to be thrown away. So use recyclable paper, get your core message on a small piece of paper that'll stick with folks.
Awesome. And Kathy, I know you said you used business cards as well. And
Yeah, I have business cards, and I have a slightly larger business card, and I did start with a brochure, which I still have, and I take out occasionally, but I mean, it's in my shop if anybody wants to pick it up.
okay.
Plus I have other giveaway things like recipes that I got from landlords and places like that.
Yeah. And I know Leslie and Kathy, you guys mentioned that you have the newsletters. I think Leslie, you said
Right.
yours was emailed out and on the website. And Kathy, you said you originally were printing it. So, I mean, even maybe just having that print, you email it now?
I email it now. Yeah, I email it now because it's too expensive to mail it to everybody.
Okay.
Yeah, we have, I have business cards I just keep with me because, I try not to overdo it with telling people about raising goats, but I found if I always talk about what I'm doing, I'm always surprised at who I run into and who I meet, and how they might be connected, have an interest in our farm. So I'm out usually giving those out. But with like our orders, our pickups, we have like a little postcard size insert that shares a little bit about our farm, like how to order, and what we offer. And then the other thing that we always give with orders is recipe cards related to certain cuts of meat. And those are a really great tool because I don't want somebody to buy my meat and then have it sit in their freezer because they're afraid to use it. I want them to enjoy it.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Another question for you, Leslie, that came into the chat while you're on. How many acres would you recommend for raising goats on pasture?
So we have our original grazing plan that we did with NRCS was 100 does with kids on 20 acres or 20 acres of permanent. That's what we have right now. We have 20 acres of permanent pasture. Our farm is much larger than that, but using rotational grazing practices where we're moving animals every like 2 to 3 days. And so that is that can kind of give you an idea of that. Of course, every farm and setup is a little bit different, but that can give you a snapshot of kind of ratio of goats to acres, depending on how you manage it. If you're not rotating your goats as often, you're probably going to not have your stocking rates are going to probably be a lot lower.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, I'm going to toss it out there for you guys one more time. Do we have any questions for our panelists that haven't been asked tonight? And Rod had to leave us. It's past his bedtime, so he had to go. All right, well, if you guys think of something, contact Gene. And he will make sure to get in touch with our speakers tonight so that we can get that information for you. I want to thank our panelists once again. It was a wonderful presentation, lots of information on marketing. It was great to hear about what you guys all do and how different the marketing plans are for each one of your businesses. So thank you again, and thank you to everybody that attended tonight and sticking with us past 8:30. Greatly appreciated. And just one more reminder that we do have a program coming up on March 23rd about profitable meat marketing and an introduction to the Cornell meat price and yield calculator. So I hope you guys will turn out then. So thank you all again for attending.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. You
Yeah,
guys were great. Have a good night, everyone.
Yes, you too. Bye.
Bye, Kathy.